Welcome back to another deep dive.
Well,
Today we're going to try and bridge a gap that I think a lot of people don't even realize is there.
right, yeah.
It's the gap between the world of, your typical Sunday school stories
Yeah.
and the gritty, dusty,
The blood and mud world of actual history.
yeah, exactly, the real world.
It's a gap that really defines how a lot of people read ancient texts. I mean, you have your religious reading on one side and your history textbooks on the other, and
And rarely do the two meet.
rarely do they meet.
So to bridge that gap today, we are bringing in a character who is, well, he's a lot of things.
Oh, he certainly is.
He's a storyteller, a traveler, a bit of a gossip, and arguably the most important historian who ever lived.
We are, of course, talking about Herodotus.
Herodotus,
Yeah.
the myth. The guy who wrote about giant ants that dig up gold dust.
Ah, yes, the giant ants. We definitely have to address the giant ants at some point.
Oh, we will get to the ants, but here is the central premise we're working with for this deep dive. Can a Greek historian, a pagan guy from the 5th century BCE, who wrote about boiling tortoises, oracle ambiguity, and, yes, giant ants,
Right.
can he actually help a Christian understand the Bible better?
It sounds totally counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It really does. Why go to a pagan Greek to understand the Hebrew scriptures?
Right. But the answer, as we found digging through the source material, is a resounding yes.
Because he offers something the Bible often just doesn't, right?
Exactly. He offers the background. I mean, the Bible focuses intensely on the theological narrative, God and his people.
The main plot.
Yes. But Herodotus, he focuses on the world they lived in. He describes the wallpaper, the furniture, the smell of the streets.
The weird customs of the neighbors.
All of it. So if you're a learner who wants your Bible reading to feel, 3D,
Grounded in real history rather than just floating in some mythical vacuum.
then this is the deep dive for you.
And we should probably clarify our mission here right up front.
Yeah, that's important. We aren't trying to say Herodotus was a believer.
No, not at all.
He wasn't. He worshipped Apollo and Zeus. And we aren't saying he's perfect either. I mean, Cicero called him the father of history, but
But others have called him the father of lies.
which is a pretty tough nickname to shake off.
Definitely. But for our purposes, we're looking for corroboration and context.
Right. We want to see where his massive work, the histories, overlaps with the biblical narrative and what that actually tells us.
And the histories isn't just some small pamphlet.
Oh, no. It's a massive, sweeping narrative of the Greco-Persian Wars. It's East versus West, democracy versus autocracy.
The founding text of Western history, basically.
Written around 430 to 425 BCE, and his method was totally unique for the time. He didn't just sit in a room and make things up. Well, mostly he didn't.
Right.
He used a method he called history.
Which is where we get the word history.
Yes, but in his Ionian dialect, it literally meant inquiry.
Inquiry, so asking questions.
Exactly. He traveled to Egypt, to Babylon, to Ukraine, which was Scythia back then, and he just asked people.
Hey, why do you do that? What happened here?
Yeah, and he wrote it all down.
He was like the original investigative journalist, just without a fact checker.
That's a very fair assessment. He wanted to preserve great and marvelous deeds so they wouldn't be forgotten.
And because he was so obsessed with the Persian Empire, he ends up preserving a lot of details that directly impact the Old Testament.
Huge amounts of detail.
So let's get into the weeds. We have to start with the biggest crossover event in ancient history.
The fall of Babylon.
Yes. This is really the heavyweight champion of biblical corroboration.
Yeah.
Let's set the scene from the Bible's perspective first.
Okay.
We have the figure of Cyrus the Great. In the Old Testament, specifically Isaiah 44 and 45, and later in the book of Ezra, Cyrus is a massive deal.
He is. Isaiah actually refers to him as the anointed one.
Which is a big word.
The Hebrew word is Mashiach, Messiah.
Wait, hold on. The Bible calls a pagan Persian king Messiah.
It does. It's the only time that title is applied to a non-Jew in that context. Now, it doesn't mean he's the savior of the soul. It means he is anointed or appointed by God for a specific earthly task.
And that task is to crush Babylon and let the Jewish exiles go home.
Precisely. And there's a very specific prophecy in Isaiah about exactly how he's going to do it.
Right. Isaiah 44.27. God says of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and then says, that saith to the deep, be dry, and I will dry up thy rivers.
And then in chapter 45, it mentions opening the two-leaved gates before him.
Now, be honest. If you're sitting in a pew reading that, drying up the deep sounds like poetry.
Oh, totally. It sounds like a metaphor for, God will remove the obstacles in your life.
Right. It sounds like the Red Sea crossing a miraculous parting of waters. or just high-flown theological poetry.
You don't read that and think, oh, this is a literal blueprint for civil engineering.
Until you read Herodotus.
Exactly, until you read Herodotus Book 1.
Yeah.
Because Herodotus gives us the actual play-by-play of the siege of Babylon in 539 BCE.
And suddenly, that poetry becomes tactical reality.
It really does.
So, walk us through the Herodotus account. Because Babylon wasn't just some village with a picket fence. This was the city.
Oh, it was a monster of a city. Herodotus describes the walls as being, and he's probably exaggerating a bit here, but still over 300 feet high.
That's absurd.
And 80 feet thick. He says they formed a massive square, roughly 14 miles on each side.
That is immense.
It was completely impenetrable. You couldn't knock it down with siege engines. You couldn't climb over it.
And inside, the Babylonians had stockpiled food for years, right?
Yes. Herodotus says they were literally standing on the walls laughing at Cyrus and his army.
They were trolling him.
They were. They felt completely 100% safe. And the Euphrates River ran right through the middle of the city.
Okay.
Entering under the walls on one side and exiting under the walls on the other, it was their main water source and a natural moat.
So, Cyrus is stuck outside. The Babylonians are partying inside. This sounds a lot like the book of Daniel, doesn't it?
It parallels Daniel 5 perfectly.
Belshazzar's feast.
Right. The Bible tells us that on the very night Babylon fell, the king and his nobles were drunk, drinking from the sacred vessels of the Jewish temple.
Completely oblivious to the danger outside.
Completely. So you have a confident, partying city inside and a frustrated Persian army outside.
What does Cyrus do?
Well, according to Herodotus, he gets creative. He realizes he can't breach the walls, but he looks at the river.
The Euphrates.
And he decides to do something completely unprecedented. He takes the non-combatant portion of his army,
Go laborers.
the shovel guys, and he sends them upstream.
To do what? Just dig?
To dig. There was an old basin or marshland nearby that a previous Babylonian queen had used for flood control.
Okay.
Cyrus orders his men to dig channels connecting the main river to this massive basin.
He's diverting the flow of the Euphrates.
He is turning down the tap.
Wow.
Herodotus says he waited until the critical moment. And keep in mind, the city is totally distracted. They are partying.
The noise of the festival probably covered the sound of the digging upstream.
Highly likely. And then he breaks the dam. The water rushes into the marsh.
And the water level of the Euphrates as it flowed under the city walls dropped.
Herodotus uses a very specific phrase. He says it dropped to the height of a man's thigh.
The height of a man's thigh. That is the literal drying up of the rivers.
It's literal. It's not a metaphor at all. The riverbed became a highway.
A muddy highway, but a highway.
Right. Cyrus's elite troops, the Immortals, waded right down into the mud, went under the massive walls, and got into the city.
But wait, I remember from the sources, Herodotus mentions walls along the riverbanks inside the city too, right?
He does.
So even if you get under the main outer wall, aren't you just trapped in the river channel inside the city?
And that is the absolute aha moment. That is the two-leaved gates of Isaiah.
Oh.
Herodotus specifically points out that if the Babylonians had been alert, they could have just closed the internal gates that led down from the streets to the river.
And the Persians would have been stuck in a giant trench.
They would have been trapped in a kill box. It would have been a massacre.
Fish in a barrel.
Exactly. But Herodotus writes that because they were engaged in a festival, because they were distracted and arrogant, those specific river gates were left open.
The gates shall not be shut.
The Persians marched up the riverbanks, walked right through those open gates, and took the city completely by surprise.
That's incredible.
Herodotus even notes that the city was so enormous that the people in the center were still dancing and partying while the people on the outskirts were already being slaughtered.
That completely changes how you read the prophecy. It moves the story from theological magic to military strategy.
And that is the real value proposition here. When a Christian reads Isaiah now, you aren't just seeing a vague, spiritualized promise.
You're seeing a prediction of a very specific tactical maneuver.
A maneuver that a Greek historian, who had absolutely no interest in Jewish prophecy, confirmed in startling detail.
It grounds the text in dirt and water.
It really makes it real.
But, we have to talk about Cyrus himself, because the Bible calls him Messiah. It paints him as this great liberator.
It does.
And it's so tempting to read that and think, oh, Cyrus must have been a secret believer. He must have been this great, holy guy who followed God.
And that is a very dangerous assumption. This is where Herodotus provides a necessary check on our imagination.
He reminds us who Cyrus really was.
He was a Persian warlord. He wasn't a Jewish saint.
He was a conqueror.
He was. And Herodotus constructs his whole narrative of Cyrus around the concept of hubris, pride.
Right.
Cyrus starts out wise, but he wins so much that he starts to think he's invincible. He begins to think he is literally above the gods.
And that leads to his downfall. Now, the Bible doesn't actually say how Cyrus died, right? It just kind of drops off.
It is completely silent on his death. But Herodotus gives us the ending. And it is, well, it's gruesome.
This is the story of Queen Thamyris.
Yes. So after taking Babylon, Cyrus decides he just wants more. He attacks the Massagetae, which was a nomadic tribe to the north.
And they're led by a warrior queen named Thamyris.
Correct. And Cyrus, being Cyrus, tries to trick them.
He crosses the river Araxes.
Which, by the way, crossing rivers is always a bad omen in Herodotus. It's a literary theme of his. You cross a boundary you shouldn't.
Right, overstepping your bounds.
So he crosses the river and sets a trap. He leaves a camp undefended with a massive banquet laid out, lots of food, and crucially, lots of strong, unmixed wine.
And the Massagetae aren't used to wine.
No, they drink fermented mare's milk. So a detachment of the Massagetae army, led by Thamyris' own son, attacks the camp.
They find the food.
They eat the food, they drink the wine, and they completely pass out.
And Cyrus comes back and slaughters them.
He slaughters them and captures the queen's son. When the son finally wakes up from his stupor and realizes what he's done, what's happened, he commits suicide in shame.
Man, that is tragic.
It is, and Queen Thamyris is just enraged. She sends a message to Cyrus that is honestly one of the great speeches of antiquity.
What does she say?
She says, "You bloodthirsty man, restore my son to me and leave this land. If you do not, I swear by the sun, I will give you your fill of blood."
I will give you your fill of blood. That is a chilling threat.
And Cyrus, completely drunk on his own legend at this point, just ignores her. He thinks, I'm Cyrus the Great, I don't lose.
So he attacks.
He attacks, and he loses.
Wow.
His army is absolutely destroyed. He is killed on the battlefield. And then Herodotus describes the scene where Thamyris walks among the dead bodies.
Looking for him.
She finds Cyrus's corpse, and she has a wineskin, a leather bag, that she's filled with human blood.
Oh, no.
She takes Cyrus's severed head and literally shoves it into the bag of blood.
That's intense.
And she says, "You destroyed me. Now I glut you with blood, just as I promised."
That is visceral. It's like a scene from a horror movie.
It really is, but think about what that does for you as a Christian reader.
Right.
It humanizes the Messiah figure of Isaiah. It tells you, look, God used this man. He was God's instrument, his hammer. But he was just a man.
He was a flawed mortal man, subject to the laws of pride and consequence.
Exactly. Being anointed for a political task didn't save his soul, and it certainly didn't save him from a really bad end.
It prevents us from idolizing the historical figure. God uses flawed people.
Herodotus shows us the flaws. The Bible shows us the purpose.
That is a really helpful distinction. It balances the view perfectly.
It does. It keeps history grounded.
Okay, I want to pivot a bit.
Mm.
We've been on the battlefield. I want to go to the palace.
Let's do it.
Because another area where Herodotus is incredibly useful is in understanding the day-to-day life of the Persian court.
Ah, yes. Ethnography.
Right. This is section 2 of our deep dive. Herodotus was just fascinatingly obsessed with how the Persians lived.
He was, and when you read his descriptions of their culture and customs, books like Esther and Daniel suddenly make a lot more sense.
Let's start with their education system. I love this detail from the sources.
It's a classic Herodotian observation. He writes that Persians educate their boys from the age of 5 to 20 in only 3 things.
3 subjects. No math, no science.
Nope. The curriculum is very simple. To ride a horse, to shoot a bow, and to speak the truth.
To speak the truth. That was it.
That was the core value. Herodotus says that the most disgraceful thing in the entire world to a Persian is to tell a lie.
That sounds incredibly noble, but it actually creates a ton of problems in the biblical narratives, doesn't it?
It really does. It explains the rigid, almost bizarre legalism we see in the text.
Think about the book of Daniel.
Right. The law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be altered.
Yeah. King Darius signs a decree that no one can pray to any god but him. Then he realizes it traps his friend Daniel. He really wants to change it, but he can't.
Right. To us, looking back, that looks like bureaucratic nonsense. You're the king. Just tear up the piece of paper.
Just issue a pardon.
But in a culture where truth is the absolute highest virtue, a king's decree is an extension of his reality. If he retracts it, he is admitting he was wrong. He is admitting he spoke a falsehood.
Which would deeply dishonor him.
It would completely delegitimize his authority. The law cannot be altered. because the king cannot lie.
That explains so much about Esther, too. When King Ahasuerus issues the decree to kill the Jews, he can't just cancel it when he finds out Esther is Jewish.
Exactly. He has to issue a second decree, allowing the Jews to defend themselves against the first decree.
He has to write a new truth to counter the old truth.
He can't erase the past. Herodotus helps us see that this wasn't just some clunky plot device the biblical author used to create tension.
It was a deep cultural reality.
A verified historical reality.
Speaking of Esther and King Ahasuerus, who is widely considered to be Xerxes in history, there is a lot of drinking in that book.
Ah, there is. The book opens with a 6-month party followed by a 7-day bender.
And Herodotus confirms that this wasn't unusual for them at all.
Not even a little bit. Herodotus loves describing Persian feasts.
What were they like?
He talks about how they would roast whole animals, entire oxen, horses, camels, and just serve them up.
A whole camel.
Yes. But his most famous observation is actually about their decision-making process.
Oh, tell us about that. This is fascinating.
He says the Persians are very, very fond of wine. And he claims that they deliberate on the most serious affairs of state while they are completely drunk.
Wait, really? They make domestic and foreign policy while hammered.
Yes, but there's a system to it.
Right.
If they decide on a course of action while they're drunk, the master of the house puts that same proposal before them again the next morning when they are sober. If they still like the idea when sober, they ratify it and do.
Does it work the other way around?
It actually does. If they make a preliminary decision while sober, they deliberately reconsider it when they are drunk to see if it still holds up.
That is certainly one way to run a global empire. It's like, write drunk, edit sober, but for geopolitics.
Exactly. But applying that context to Esther, like a chapter 1.
Okay.
The king is hosting this massive feast. The text literally says, when the heart of the king was merry with wine.
He commands Queen Vashti to come out and show off her beauty.
Right. And when she refuses, he banishes her on the spot.
It's a completely rash, drunken decision.
But reading Herodotus, you realize this wasn't just a one-off bad night for the king. This was the institutional culture of the empire.
They believed that wine revealed truth.
Yes. So the volatility of the king in Esther isn't just him being a bad egg or a caricature of a tyrant. He is operating within a culturally mandated framework of excess.
It makes the danger in that book feel so much more real. You're dealing with a superpower run by people who legally mandate intoxication for their brainstorming sessions.
It is terrifying, and it perfectly explains why all the characters in Esther are constantly walking on eggshells.
There's another major conflict in Esther that Herodotus sheds light on. The bowing.
Ah, the feud between Mordecai and Haman.
Right. Haman the Agagite is promoted to prime minister, basically, and he demands that everyone bow to him in the street. And Mordecai refuses.
And very often, we read that as Mordecai just being stubborn. Or maybe he just really hates Haman personally because of their ancestral history.
Right, the whole Amalekite thing.
But Herodotus gives us the key to the physical social code here. It's a practice called proskynesis.
Proskynesis, that's the Greek word for bowing.
It is. Herodotus explains what he calls the Persian kiss. He says when two Persians meet in the street, you can tell their exact social rank immediately by what they do.
Okay, how?
If they are absolute equals, they kiss each other on the lips.
Interesting.
If one is slightly lower in rank than the other, they kiss on the cheek.
Okay, that makes sense.
But if one is much lower in rank, a peasant meeting a lord, for example, he falls down and completely prostrates himself on the ground. He performs proskynesis.
So to a Persian, this is just a standard salute. It's just acknowledging military or social rank.
Correct. But to a Greek like Herodotus, and certainly to a Jew like Mordecai, bowing your face to the ground is strictly an act of worship.
It is reserved solely for God.
Yes. So we have this massive cultural mistranslation happening at the gate of the palace.
Haman sees himself as a high government official demanding a standard salute. He thinks Mordecai is just being wildly insubordinate.
And Mordecai sees a man demanding idolatry. He thinks Haman is demanding to be treated like a god.
It raises the stakes of the conflict so much. Mordecai isn't just being rude or politically defiant. He is drawing a hard theological line in the sand. I will not bow.
And Herodotus confirms that this bowing wasn't optional, it was strictly enforced by law.
So Mordecai was effectively committing a capital crime against the social order, Every single day he sat at that gate and refused to drop.
Every single day. It is incredibly tense.
It really is. And that connects perfectly to the other famous rule in Esther, the golden scepter.
If I perish, I perish.
Right. Esther is absolutely terrified to go see the king, uninvited to plead for her people. The law says if you enter the inner court without a summons, you die.
Unless he extends the golden scepter.
Now, skeptics have looked at that detail for years and said, come on, that's a fairy tale trope. The king can't possibly be that inaccessible. He's her husband.
Right, but Herodotus gives us the actual historical origin of why that specific law existed.
He does.
He does. He tells the story of Deioces, who was a Median king who founded their dynasty long before the Persians took over. Deioces wanted to secure his power from rivals, so he built this massive, fortified palace complex called Ecbatana, and he established a very strict protocol.
That was the protocol.
That no one should enter into the presence of the king. Ever. All business had to be done through messengers.
He completely isolated himself.
Yes. Herodotus says Deioces did this so that his peers, the men he grew up with, wouldn't see him as a normal man anymore. He wanted them to see him as something other.
He was manufacturing mystique.
And safety. Let's be honest, if no one gets near you, no one can stab you.
Very true.
By the time of Esther and King Ahasuerus, this protocol had been inherited and in place for centuries. It was the absolute bedrock of court security.
So when Esther decides to walk into that inner court, she isn't just interrupting his workday. She is violating a centuries-old national security protocol.
Precisely. She is walking into a kill zone. It turns the golden scepter scene from a dramatic flair in a story into a documented reality of the Median Persian court.
The danger was real.
The danger was incredibly real, and the history completely backs it up.
I love that. It really does make the Bible feel 3D. You aren't just reading a nice story. You are watching a woman navigate a verified, high-stakes political minefield.
That's the power of having this context.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit. We've talked about military tactics and court manners, but Herodotus is also a philosopher in his own way, isn't he?
Very much so. He thinks a lot about fate and gods and why things happen the way they do.
The theology of history, which brings us to section 3 of our outline.
Right. And there's absolutely no better example of this than the story of Croesus. Croesus is really the centerpiece of Book 1 of the Histories. He was the king of Lydia, which is in modern-day Turkey.
And he was fabulously wealthy. We still use the phrase rich as Croesus today.
We do, and his story intersects perfectly with the ancient idea of divine guidance and prophecy.
Because Croesus was worried about the rising power of Persia, right?
Mm-hmm.
This was right before Cyrus became huge.
Exactly. Croesus wanted to know, should I attack them now, before they get too strong?
But he didn't want to just guess. He wanted to ask the gods.
But Croesus was a uniquely smart guy. He knew that psychics and oracles could be frauds, or just tell you what you wanted to hear.
Right.
So he came up with a test. He basically designed a double-blind control study for prophecy.
I absolutely love this part. Tell us what he did.
He sent different messengers to all the famous oracles in the ancient world, Delphi, Dodona, and Pharis.
Okay.
He told all his messengers, on the exact 100th day after you leave me, ask the oracle you are visiting exactly one question. What is King Croesus doing right now?
He's testing their remote viewing skills.
Exactly. And on that 100th day, Croesus decided to do something so weird, so completely random, that no human could possibly guess it.
What did he do?
He took a tortoise and a lamb.
A tortoise and a lamb.
He chopped them up into pieces, and he boiled them together in a large bronze cauldron with a bronze lid.
A tortoise and lamb stew.
Yeah.
Not exactly the royal menu you'd expect.
No, not at all. So the messengers asked their questions, write down the answers, and come back. And the oracle at Delphi the Pythia had given this exact answer in hexameter verse.
Let's hear it.
She said, I smell the savor of a hard-shelled tortoise boiling and lamb's flesh with it. Bronze is laid beneath it, and bronze is put upon it.
Wow. She nailed it.
She completely nailed it. Croesus was floored. He was convinced that Delphi had a genuine direct line to the divine.
So you showered them with gold.
He sent them unbelievable amounts of treasure. And then he finally asked the question that actually mattered.
Should I attack Persia?
Yes. And he gets the famous answer. The oracle says, if you attack Persia, you will destroy a great empire.
I mean, that sounds pretty good. If I'm Croesus, I'm taking that as a solid green light.
Any king would. And he did. He attacked. He marched his army across the river Helis.
Another river crossing.
Another river crossing. And he was absolutely crushed by Cyrus.
Destroyed.
He lost his army. He lost his capital city, Sardis. He was captured and almost burned alive on a pyre.
So he did destroy a great empire.
He did, his own.
That is the ultimate ambiguity of the pagan divine.
It really is. When he sent messengers to complain to the oracle later, they basically said, hey, you didn't ask which empire, that's on you.
It's a lawyer's answer. Read the fine print of the prophecy.
Exactly. But here is the theological contrast that's so important for you as a Christian listener.
Okay.
Herodotus portrays a world ruled by two main forces: hubris, which is pride, and nemesis, which is retribution.
Explain how that works in his history.
The Greek view was that the gods are fundamentally envious. They do not like it when humans get too happy, too rich, or too powerful.
They see it as a threat.
Or just an annoyance. They are like tall poppies. If one poppy grows higher than the rest, the wind comes and cuts it down.
Right.
In fact, Solon, the Athenian wise man, warns Croesus early in the book. He tells him, count no man happy until he is dead.
Because at any moment, the gods could just decide to trip you up.
Exactly. It's a cyclical, deeply tragic view of history. You rise, you get proud, the gods smack you down, repeat forever.
How does that compare to the biblical view then? Because the Bible warns against pride constantly. Pride goes before destruction.
It does. The raw observation of human mechanics is the same. Power corrupts. But the source is entirely different.
Right.
In Herodotus, the gods are petty tricksters acting out of envy. In the Bible, God is holy and purposeful, acting out of justice.
It's providence versus fate.
Exactly. Biblical history isn't just a spinning wheel of rising and falling empires. It's a line. It's a covenant. It is moving towards a specific redemption.
So reading Herodotus helps a Christian see that the ancients did deeply believe in divine intervention. We sometimes project our modern secular mindset onto the past.
We do. We think everyone was just doing secular realpolitik. But Herodotus shows us kings making massive world-altering military decisions based on oracles and their fear of the gods.
It totally challenges the modern idea that history is just random.
Yes, and interestingly enough, the early church fathers actually used Herodotus for exactly this purpose.
Really? How so?
Writers like Athenagoras, an early Christian apologist, would quote Herodotus directly to argue that the pagan gods were just demons or recent human inventions. They used Herodotus to deconstruct paganism from the inside out.
Like, look at your own greatest historian. He shows that your gods are just cruel tricksters.
Exactly. It was a very pragmatic, tactical use of his text by the early church.
I want to touch on Egypt briefly before we move on to the New Testament, because Book 2 of the Histories is basically Herodotus going on a massive vacation to Egypt and writing down everything he sees.
It's essentially the world's first travel blog.
Uh-huh.
And for the student of the Exodus, it is absolutely fascinating.
Now, we have to be clear, Herodotus visited Egypt in the 400s BCE. This is long, long after the Exodus would have happened.
Right, so he didn't meet Moses.
No.
But he describes a culture that is still incredibly distinct, which perfectly confirms the biblical picture of Egypt as this totally different world.
What specifically stands out in his account?
The total obsession with cleanliness and ritual purity. He talks about the Egyptian priests shaving their entire bodies every other day.
Everything.
Eyebrows, hair, everything, so that no lice or anything impure would be on them while they were serving the gods.
That is dedication.
He also talks about them wearing only linen, never wool, inside the temples.
Because wool is an animal product.
Right, and therefore considered unclean for holy service.
Which heavily parallels the Levitical laws given to the Jewish priests, right?
It parallels and it contrasts. The Bible sets up a system of purity that is very similar in form washings, distinct fabrics, avoiding mixed materials, but very different in theology.
Right.
But Herodotus confirms that this whole region, the ancient Near East, was completely obsessed with these physical distinctions of holiness.
And then there's the topic of circumcision.
Oh, right. This is a big one. Herodotus claims that the Colchians and the Ethiopians learned the practice of circumcision from the Egyptians. And he also claims that the Phoenicians and the Syrians of Palestine, which is almost certainly his term for the Jews, learned it from them too.
So he thinks the Jews just copied the Egyptians.
That's his working theory, yeah. He says these are the only nations that have practiced circumcision from the beginning.
Now, the Bible, of course, traces it back directly to Abraham as a covenant marker.
Right. So Herodotus might be wrong about the historical origin. He likely is.
Right.
But whether he is right about the origin or not, his outside observation confirms that this practice was a major visible cultural marker in that area.
It distinguished these groups from the Greeks and the Romans, who definitely did not do that.
It reinforces that sense of otherness. When you read the Old Testament, you constantly feel that cultural pressure on the Israelites to be distinct. Do not be like the nations around you.
And Herodotus confirms that the pressure was real. The Egyptians were the cultural heavyweights of the ancient world, and everyone was defining themselves either in relation to them or against them.
Yeah.
So we've covered the Old Testament connections pretty well. But our outline also mentions the New Testament.
It does.
Now, Herodotus died hundreds of years before Jesus was even born. How is there a connection to the New Testament?
It's definitely more subtle. We obviously aren't going to find Herodotus mentioning the apostles or anything like that.
Right.
But we see a profound connection in the invention of history itself.
The actual style of writing.
Yes. Before Herodotus, you essentially had two ways of recording the past. You had lists of kings. King so-and-so reigned 20 years and died.
Very dry.
Or you had myths. Epic poetry about gods and heroes like Achilles or Hercules.
Sing, O muse, of the rage of Achilles.
Exactly. That kind of story is timeless. It happens in a sort of dream time.
Right.
But Herodotus invented prose history. As we said, his word history means inquiry. He traveled, he asked questions, he cross-examined witnesses.
He tried to figure out what actually happened on the ground.
And we see this exact same method adopted in the New Testament, specifically in the Gospel of Luke.
Oh, that's a great point.
Listen to how Luke starts his gospel. He writes, "Since many have undertaken to set down an orderly account, I too decided, after investigating everything carefully from the very first."
Investigating everything carefully.
That is the Herodotean method.
Yeah.
Luke is signaling to his Greco-Roman readers, I am not writing a myth here. I am not writing epic poetry. I am writing history.
He is deliberately placing the gospel narrative into the realm of investigatable facts.
Exactly. Just like Herodotus placed the Persian War in the realm of facts, Luke says things like, in the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, Pontius Pilate being governor of Judea.
He anchors it to real people and real dates.
That is a huge, huge shift. It moves the gospel out of once upon a time and into the concrete timeline of the Roman Empire.
And Herodotus was the guy who paved the way for that exact kind of writing. He created the genre that the evangelists eventually used to say, this is historically true.
Exactly right.
But we should probably address the critique from the conservative evangelical side that was mentioned in our sources, because Herodotus does get some things wrong.
He absolutely does. He relies heavily on hearsay. We mentioned it earlier. He talks about giant ants in India that dig up gold dust.
Which, to be fair, some modern scholars think might have been a mistranslation of a Persian word for marmots, these large burrowing rodents. But still, it sounds crazy.
Sounds totally crazy. And the critique is valid. Herodotus is incredibly valuable for external confirmation, but he is inherently flawed.
He is pagan.
He is. He captures the stage perfectly, the geography, the weird customs, the politics, but he completely misses the playwright.
He doesn't see the God of Israel working behind the scenes.
No. He sees the event, but not the true theological interpretation of the event.
So the Christian reader uses Herodotus to build the physical world, but still relies on Scripture for the meaning of that world.
That's the balance. He is an unwitting witness.
Unwitting testimony, yes.
He wasn't trying to prove Isaiah right about Cyrus. He was just recording what he heard people say about Cyrus on his travels.
And the fact that it aligns so perfectly with Isaiah makes it arguably more powerful than if a believer had written it.
Because he has zero bias in favor of the Bible. He's just a guy writing down what he thinks happened.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive through the ancient world, what is the big takeaway here?
Yeah.
Why should you, a modern person, maybe someone prepping for a Bible study or just reading on your own, why bother with a 2,500-year-old Greek text?
I think it really comes down to entering the mental map of the Bible.
The mental map.
Yes. When we read scripture in a modern vacuum, it can easily feel like a series of disconnected moral stories just floating in space.
It can feel very flat, two-dimensional.
But when you read Herodotus alongside it, you suddenly smell the burning sacrifice. You feel the genuine terror of a Persian king's irrevocable decree.
You understand why Babylon was so terrifying to the Israelites and why its sudden fall was so miraculously shocking?
It grounds the faith in reality.
It does. It reminds you that these were real people navigating a highly complex world of absolute kings, ambiguous oracles, and shifting empires.
And Herodotus actually leaves us with a warning that I think perfectly bridges his world and the biblical world.
Ah, the warning about soft lands.
Yes, this is a really provocative thought to end on. Herodotus ends his massive historical work with a warning delivered by Cyrus the Great himself.
What does he say?
He warns the Persians not to move down into the rich, luxurious, fertile lands that they have just conquered.
Why not? They won them.
Because, Cyrus says, soft lands breed soft men.
Wow.
He warns them that if they get too comfortable with luxury, they will become weak, and they will eventually become the conquered instead of the conquerors.
And historically speaking, that is exactly what happened to the Persian Empire.
It is. They fell to Alexander the Great. And the Bible has a very similar warning, doesn't it?
It really does, that spiritual complacency breeds destruction. Deuteronomy says, "When you have eaten and are full, beware lest you forget the Lord."
It's that exact same cycle of hubris and nemesis again.
It is.
Herodotus saw the moral arc of history, that pride always leads to a fall. And if a pagan historian could see that so clearly just by observing human events.
Why do we, with all our modern data and all our access to truth, often fail to see the spiritual consequences of our own actions?
That is a question definitely worth chewing on.
It really is. Well, a huge thank you to Herodotus for being our ancient travel guide today, and thank you for helping us unpack it all.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Anytime.
And to you listening, thanks for taking the deep dive with us. We'll see you next time.